A millionaire saw a photo of her in a bikini. He went crazy with jealousy and took the first flight. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. Some decisions change everything. Kate Dickie was about to make one of those. The glass walls of the 42nd floor reflected the Manhattan skyline like a mirror of ambition. Kate Dickie stood before the massive window, her dark brown eyes tracing the patterns of traffic below, while her mind processed the campaign metrics displayed on her tablet. At 27, she possessed the kind of natural beauty that commanded attention without demanding it. Rich mahogany skin that seemed to glow under the office's sophisticated lighting, natural hair styled in an elegant twist that framed her angular cheekbones perfectly. Today she wore a tailored navy blazer that spoke of success earned, not given. "Kate, these numbers are phenomenal," announced Trevor Walsh, the marketing director, as he approached with a stack of reports. "The Meridian campaign exceeded projections by 38%. The client is calling it revolutionary." She turned from the window, a subtle smile playing across her full lips. "It's not revolutionary, Trevor. It's honest. People respond to authenticity, not manufactured emotion." Her voice carried a warm confidence that had become her signature in the 3 years since joining Morrison & Associates. Kate had learned early that in corporate America, a black woman had to be twice as prepared and 3 times as articulate. She had embraced that challenge, transforming it into her superpower. "The boss wants to see you," Trevor continued, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "I think a promotion is coming." Kate's pulse quickened, but she maintained her composed exterior. "When?" 10 minutes. Conference room A. As Trevor walked away, Kate gathered her materials with practiced efficiency. She had been preparing for this moment, not just professionally, but emotionally. For 3 years, she had poured herself into this company, sacrificing social life, relationships, and even simple pleasures like long vacations or lazy Sunday mornings. The work had been fulfilling, the challenges invigorating, but lately, something felt incomplete. Her phone buzzed. A text from her college roommate, Camille. "Girl, when was the last time you did something just for you? Life is happening while you're busy making money." Kate stared at the message, then at her reflection in the dark computer screen. When had she last done something purely for joy? When had she last felt genuinely excited about something that wasn't work-related? The elevator chimed softly as she reached the executive floor. Here everything was more refined. Deeper carpets, quieter voices, the scent of expensive cologne and fresh flowers. Kate had been here many times for meetings, but today felt different. Today felt like a threshold. Conference room A overlooked Central Park, its enormous windows framing the green expanse like a living painting. Sean Bean sat at the head of the mahogany table, and Kate felt that familiar flutter in her chest that she had been studiously ignoring for months. At 38, Sean possessed an effortless elegance that transcended his obvious wealth. Tall and lean with an athletic build that suggested discipline rather than vanity, his dark hair was perfectly styled without looking manufactured. His steel blue eyes held an intelligence that matched her own, and when he smiled, which he did now as she entered, it transformed his entire face from handsome to devastating. "Kate, please, sit." His voice was warm, genuinely pleased to see her. Not the distant politeness she expected from a CEO, but something more personal. She chose the chair across from him, noting how his gaze lingered on her face as if memorizing details. "Trevor mentioned you wanted to discuss the Meridian results." "Among other things." Sean leaned back, his expression becoming more serious. "Kate, in 3 years, you've revolutionized how we approach client communications. Your insights, your strategies, your ability to connect with diverse audiences, it's extraordinary. Thank you." She kept her tone professional, though his praise sent warmth through her chest. "I want to offer you the position of Senior Communications Director. It comes with a significant salary increase, equity options, and your own team of 12. The offer hung in the air between them. It was everything she had worked for. The validation of every late night, every weekend spent perfecting presentations, every moment she had chosen career over personal life. "That's incredible," she said slowly. "Thank you for recognizing my contributions." Sean leaned forward slightly. "There's more. I'd like you to spearhead our European expansion, 6 months in London, building our international communications strategy." Kate felt her breath catch. 6 months in London. 6 months working even more closely with Sean, whose presence already affected her more than was professionally appropriate, 6 months further from any semblance of personal life. "I'm honored by your confidence in me," she began carefully. "But," Sean's perceptive gaze caught the hesitation she thought she had hidden. Kate looked out at Central Park, where people were walking dogs, having picnics, living their lives outside of conference rooms and quarterly reports. "Can I have some time to consider?" Something shifted in Sean's expression. Surprise, perhaps disappointment. "Of course, take whatever time you need." As Kate stood to leave, Sean spoke again. "Kate, whatever you decide, I want you to know that you've already achieved something remarkable here. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise." Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment, the professional boundaries dissolved. Kate saw something raw in his gaze. Admiration, yes, but something deeper. Something that made her pulse race and her carefully constructed walls tremble. "Thank you, Sean. I'll be in touch soon." That evening, Kate sat in her Harlem apartment, a sleek space she had furnished with care but rarely had time to enjoy. The promotion offer lay before her on the coffee table, along with her laptop displaying a travel website she had been browsing impulsively. Santorini, Greece. Whitewashed buildings cascading down cliffsides toward impossibly blue water, a place where she could disappear from deadlines and conference calls, where she could remember who Kate Dickey was beyond her job title. Her phone rang. "Mom," appeared on the screen. "Baby girl, you sound tired," her mother said without preamble. "When was the last time you took a real vacation?" Kate smiled despite herself. "How did you know that's exactly what I was thinking about?" "Because I'm your mother, and because you've been running on ambition alone for too long. Sometimes we need to step away from what we think we want to remember what we actually need." After the call ended, Kate stared at the Santorini photos on her screen. 2 weeks. When had she last taken 2 weeks for herself? When had she last made a decision based purely on what would make her happy? She reached for her laptop, and before she could second-guess herself, began typing. "Dear Sean, thank you for the incredible opportunity. Before I can give you my decision, I need to take some personal time. I'll be traveling for the next 2 weeks, and I'll have my answer when I return." Her finger hovered over the send button. This felt reckless, unprecedented, completely unlike the calculated Kate Dickey everyone knew, and that was exactly why she pressed send. As Kate booked her flight to Santorini, she had no way of knowing that her decision to choose herself would set in motion events that would change everything, including the heart of the man who had been watching her from his office window, wondering if he had just lost the most important person in his life. Freedom felt different than Kate had imagined. It tasted like salt air and possibilities. The JFK departure lounge buzzed with the familiar chaos of international travel, but Kate felt oddly detached from it all. She sat in the premium boarding area, her designer carry-on at her feet, watching planes taxi across the tarmac through floor-to-ceiling windows. For the first time in 3 years, her phone wasn't buzzing with urgent emails or client emergencies. She had set her out-of-office message, delegated her active projects to Trevor, and done something that felt almost revolutionary. She had turned off her work notifications. Flight 204 to Athens, Greece, now boarding first-class passengers. Kate gathered her belongings, a small thrill running through her chest. First class. She had splurged without guilt, without calculating the cost against quarterly projections or budget forecasts. The ticket had simply represented what she wanted, and for once that had been enough. Meanwhile, 15 floors above Manhattan in his corner office, Sean stared at Kate's email for the dozenth time that morning. The words hadn't changed, but their impact seemed to deepen with each reading. "I need to take some personal time." He had built his career on reading between lines, on understanding what people didn't say as much as what they did. Kate's message was professional, polite, and completely unlike her. In 3 years, she had never taken more than a long weekend. She had worked through Christmas, powered through a mild case of food poisoning, and once delivered a presentation with a sprained ankle that she had somehow managed to hide until the meeting ended. "Sir," his assistant Janet appeared in the doorway. "The Meridian executives are here for the debrief." Sean turned from the window, Kate's email still open on his screen. "Give me 5 minutes." As Janet retreated, Sean found himself doing something he hadn't done since college. He opened Kate's company profile and studied her photograph. Professional headshot, hair pulled back, that confident smile that had become synonymous with successful campaigns. But now he noticed things he had trained himself to ignore. The warmth in her dark eyes, the elegant curve of her neck, the way her lips seemed perpetually on the verge of saying something that would surprise him. He closed the laptop with more force than necessary. This was exactly the kind of thinking that could destroy everything he had built. 35,000 feet above the Atlantic, Kate reclined in her leather seat and allowed herself to truly relax for the first time in months. The flight attendant, a cheerful woman named Sophia with a melodic Greek accent, had been particularly attentive. "First time to Santorini?" Sophia asked as she refreshed Kate's wine. "First time anywhere for pleasure in a very long time," Kate admitted, surprising herself with the honesty. "You are escaping something." It wasn't a question. Kate considered this. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm trying to find something." "Santorini is good for both," Sophia said with a knowing smile. "The island has a way of showing you what you need to see." Kate pulled out her phone to capture the view through the window. Endless blue sky meeting endless blue ocean. As she composed the shot, her thumb hovered over the contacts list. An impulse struck her to text Sean, to share this moment of freedom with the one person who might understand what it meant for her to be here. Instead, she typed a message to Camille. 35,000 feet above the Atlantic. You were right. Life is happening. The response came quickly. "Finally, post everything, live everything, feel everything. You deserve this, babe." Back in New York, Sean found himself unable to focus on the Meridian debrief. The executives praised Kate's innovative approach, asked about her availability for future projects, inquired about her vision for their brand expansion. Each question felt like a reminder of what he might lose if she decided not to return. "Where is Ms. Dickey today?" asked Margaret Henley, Meridian's CEO. "I was hoping to thank her personally." "She's taking some well-deserved personal time," Sean replied smoothly. "I'll be sure to pass along your gratitude. I hope you're taking good care of her," Margaret continued. "Talent like that doesn't come along often. Other agencies would kill to have someone with her insights." The comment hit Sean harder than intended. Of course, other agencies would want Kate. She was brilliant, innovative, culturally fluent in ways that gave her clients unprecedented market reach. He had been so focused on what she brought to his company that he had never seriously considered she might choose to bring those talents elsewhere. After the meeting, Sean stood alone in his office, Manhattan stretching out below him like a chessboard of ambition and opportunity. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to Kate's contact information. His thumb hovered over the call button. What would he say? "Come back early because I can't function without you in the building. I'm realizing that my feelings for you might be more than professional. I've been staring at your empty office like a lovesick teenager." He set the phone down and returned to his desk where a stack of international expansion reports waited for his review. London, Paris, Amsterdam. Cities where Morrison and Associates could establish a European presence. Cities where Kate could build something extraordinary if she chose to stay. Cities where he could imagine himself traveling frequently, finding excuses to oversee operations personally. At Santorini's airport, Kate felt the Mediterranean sun on her skin as she stepped off the plane. The air smelled different here, cleaner, tinged with sea salt and something indefinable that might have been possibility itself. She had arranged for a driver to take her to the boutique hotel in Oya, perched on the island's famous cliffs. During the winding drive through volcanic landscape, dotted with white buildings and blue domes, Kate felt something inside her chest begin to uncoil. The tension she hadn't realized she was carrying in her shoulders started to dissipate. When had she last noticed the color of the sky without relating it to a brand palette? When had she last breathed without checking the time? Her hotel room was a dream of Cycladic architecture, whitewashed walls, cerulean blue accents, and a private terrace overlooking the caldera. Kate stood on the balcony, the Aegean Sea spreading endlessly before her, and did something she hadn't done in years. She laughed. Not the polite professional laugh she used in meetings or the careful social laugh she employed at networking events. This was pure joy, bubbling up from somewhere deep inside her that she had almost forgotten existed. She pulled out her phone and snapped a photo, her hand holding a glass of local wine against the backdrop of the sunset-painted sea. The image captured everything she felt in that moment: freedom, beauty, the delicious anticipation of days ahead with no agenda except her own pleasure. Before she could second-guess herself, she posted it to Instagram with a simple caption: "Sometimes you have to get lost to remember where you belong." The response was immediate. Likes and comments from friends, colleagues, even a few clients who followed her personal account. But as she scrolled through the notifications, one absence struck her powerfully. Sean didn't follow her on social media. She had never thought about it before, but now the distance felt intentional, professional. a boundary that suddenly seemed less like wisdom and more like a wall between her real self and the person he knew. As Kate settled into her first evening of true freedom, she had no idea that 3,000 miles away, Sean was discovering her Instagram post through a mutual colleague's story, and that the image of her genuine happiness was about to drive him to make the most impulsive decision of his carefully controlled life. Some photographs tell stories. This one changed everything Sean thought he knew about himself. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sean's penthouse apartment, casting geometric shadows across the minimalist decor. He stood in his kitchen, espresso cup in hand, scrolling through industry news on his tablet, when a notification popped up from LinkedIn. Janet Morrison, a colleague from the advertising world, had shared an Instagram story. Sean rarely paid attention to social media beyond its professional applications, but something about the preview image made him pause. A woman's silhouette against an impossibly blue backdrop, wine glass raised toward a Mediterranean sunset. The composition was artful, but it was the pure joy radiating from the figure that stopped his thumb mid-scroll. He tapped the story and felt his breath catch. Kate, but not the Kate he knew from conference rooms and quarterly presentations. This Kate was radiant, her hair loose and catching the golden light, wearing a flowing white sundress that made her skin glow like polished amber. She was laughing, genuinely, uninhibitedly, in a way he had never seen before. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to get lost to remember where you belong." Sean stared at the image until it disappeared, then found himself opening Instagram and searching for Kate's profile. He had never thought to look before. Their relationship had been carefully compartmentalized within professional boundaries, but now, scrolling through her feed, he discovered a version of Kate he had never known existed. There she was at a gallery opening, discussing art with animated gestures, at a bookstore cafe reading with complete absorption, dancing at what looked like a friend's wedding, her face lit with pure happiness. Each image revealed layers of the woman who sat across from him in meetings, layers he had trained himself not to notice. The most recent post was from Santorini, Kate on a terrace overlooking the caldera, arms spread wide as if embracing the entire world. Day 2 of remembering what it feels like to just breathe. Sean set down his tablet and walked to his own terrace, Manhattan sprawling below him like a concrete promise of achievement. He had everything he had worked for: success, wealth, respect, power. So why did Kate's simple photo of freedom make his carefully constructed life feel like an elegant prison? His phone buzzed. A text from his brother, Cameron, who ran the family's Boston office. "Saw your employees' vacation pics. When's the last time you looked that happy?" Sean frowned. How had Cameron seen Kate's photos? Another message. "Jennifer follows her, says she's brilliant and gorgeous. Also says you're an idiot if you haven't noticed." Sean closed his eyes. Jennifer was Cameron's wife, notorious for her matchmaking attempts and uncanny ability to read situations that others missed. The fact that she had noticed his interest in Kate meant he had been less professional than he thought. At Morrison & Associates, the morning felt different without Kate's energy permeating the office. Sean found himself walking past her workspace more frequently than necessary, noting the carefully organized desk, the succulent plant she watered religiously, the framed photo of her family that he had never really examined before. "The Hartwell presentation needs her touch," Trevor said, appearing beside him with a stack of mock-ups. "These feel generic compared to what Kate would produce." Sean studied the designs. Trevor was right. They were competent, professional, completely forgettable. Kate brought something indefinable to their work, an understanding of human emotion that transcended demographics and market research. "Reschedule the Hartwell meeting," Sean decided. "We'll wait until Kate returns." Trevor raised an eyebrow. "That's 2 weeks, sir. Hartwell wanted to move fast on this. Then they'll appreciate the quality when we deliver something exceptional." As Trevor walked away, Sean realized he had just made a business decision based entirely on missing one person's creative input. The thought should have concerned him. Instead, it felt like the first honest choice he had made in months. That evening, Sean sat in his home office ostensibly reviewing quarterly reports, but his laptop screen displayed Kate's Instagram profile, her latest story playing on repeat. She had posted a video of herself attempting to cook something that looked distinctly Greek, while laughing at her obvious inexperience in the kitchen. "How do you mess up olive oil and tomatoes?" she was saying to whoever was filming. "I'm a communications genius, but apparently vegetables have a language I don't speak." The camera panned to show a moderately disastrous kitchen scene, and Kate's laughter filled his quiet apartment with a warmth that made him realize how sterile his perfect space actually was. Sean found himself smiling, really smiling, for the first time in days. He replayed the video, studying Kate's face when she was completely unguarded, noting how her eyes crinkled when she laughed, how she gestured with her whole body when she was animated. Then his smile faded as he realized something that hit him like a physical blow. He was in love with her. Not infatuated, not professionally impressed, not attracted in some casual way he could dismiss. He was completely, irrevocably in love with Kate Dickie, and it had probably been true for longer than he cared to admit. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like finally acknowledging something he had been fighting for months. Every meeting where he found excuses to extend their discussions, every time he had structured team assignments to ensure Kate would be present, every decision that had somehow centered around her insights and opinions. Sean stood and walked to his bar cart, pouring himself a whiskey he didn't want, while his mind raced through implications and complications. Kate worked for him. She was brilliant and ambitious, with every reason to pursue opportunities beyond Morrison and Associates. She had given no indication that she saw him as anything other than her boss, and she was currently 3,000 miles away, looking happier than he had ever seen her, in a place where she could discover who she was beyond the corporate world that had consumed both their lives. He pulled out his phone and opened her contact, thumb hovering over the call button. What would he say? What right did he have to intrude on her hard-earned freedom with his emotional revelations? Instead, he opened his laptop and began typing an email he knew he would never send. Kate, watching you discover joy in Santorini makes me realize how little joy either of us has allowed ourselves in the pursuit of professional success. I've spent 3 years admiring your brilliant mind while trying to ignore how you make me feel like a better version of myself just by being in the same room. I don't know what this means for us professionally, but I know I can't continue pretending that what I feel for you is purely collegial. Enjoy your freedom. You deserve every moment of happiness. Sean stared at the unsent message for a long time before deleting it and closing the laptop. But as he prepared for bed, one thought persisted with growing intensity. What if Kate's journey of self-discovery didn't include a desire to return to the life she had left behind? What if he had lost her before he had ever found the courage to tell her how he felt? That night, as Sean lay awake staring at the ceiling, he made a decision that would have seemed impossible just weeks before, a decision that would require him to risk everything he had built for something he was only beginning to understand. Kate was beginning to remember who she was beneath the success, and someone unexpected was about to remember her too. The morning air in Santorini carried the scent of jasmine and sea salt as Kate made her way down the cobblestone path toward the village center. She had traded her usual power suits for a flowing coral sundress and comfortable sandals, her natural hair loose and catching the Mediterranean breeze. For the first time in years, she wasn't checking her phone every 5 minutes or mentally rehearsing presentation points. Instead, she was simply present. The local cafe she had discovered yesterday sat tucked between a bookstore and a small art gallery, its blue-painted tables spilling onto a terrace overlooking the sea. Kate had claimed the corner table as her own, spreading out a journal she hadn't touched since college and a novel she'd been meaning to read for 2 years. "The usual?" asked Dimitris, the cafe owner, approaching with his warm smile and heavily accented English. "Please," Kate replied, marveling at how easily she had fallen into a routine that revolved around pleasure rather than productivity. As Dimitris returned with her Greek coffee and pastry, Kate opened her journal and began writing. Day 4. I caught myself laughing at absolutely nothing this morning. Just standing on my balcony, watching fishing boats in the harbor, and laughing because it felt good to be alive. When did I stop doing that? When did joy become something I scheduled between meetings? She paused, pen hovering over the page. Her phone lay silent beside her journal. She had turned off roaming data to avoid the temptation of work emails. The silence should have felt isolating. Instead, it felt liberating. A commotion near the harbor caught her attention. A small crowd had gathered around someone who appeared to be struggling with luggage and directions. Kate squinted against the sun, noting the figure's obvious frustration and expensive but wrinkled clothing that suggested long travel. Then the man turned, and Kate's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. Charles Dance. Her childhood friend stood 30 yards away, looking completely out of place among the relaxed tourists and locals. Even from a distance, She could see his characteristic way of running his hand through his dark hair when agitated, a gesture she remembered from their college days when he was stressed about exams or relationships. Kate stood quickly, leaving money on the table, and made her way down to the harbor. Charles was attempting to communicate with a taxi driver in a mixture of English and what sounded like poorly remembered high school Spanish. "Charlie," she called out, using the nickname only his oldest friends were allowed. He spun around and his face transformed from frustration to pure relief. "Kate, thank God. I was beginning to think I'd made a terrible mistake." They embraced warmly, and Kate felt the comfort of familiar friendship. Charles had been her study partner at Columbia, her confidant during heartbreaks, the friend who had celebrated every professional victory with genuine pride. "What are you doing here?" she asked, stepping back to study his travel-weary face. "Conference in Athens got cancelled last minute. I remembered you mentioning Santorini in one of your posts. Thought I'd surprise my favorite overworked friend with some company." He gestured helplessly at his surroundings, though I'm starting to think I should have stuck to destinations with more infrastructure. Kate laughed. "It's perfect here once you surrender to the pace. Come on, let me help you find your hotel." As they walked through the winding streets, Charles regaled her with stories from his recent promotion to senior partner at his law firm. Kate found herself genuinely engaged in conversation that wasn't about campaigns or client objectives. When had she last talked to someone who knew her before she became Kate Dickey, Communications Director? "You look different," Charles observed, as they paused to ask directions from a local shop owner. "Different how?" "Relaxed, happy, like the Kate I knew in college before you decided to conquer the corporate world single-handedly." They found Charles's hotel, a charming boutique property overlooking the caldera, and agreed to meet for dinner after he had time to recover from his journey. Kate returned to her own hotel with an unexpected lightness in her step. Having a friend here felt like the perfect addition to her rediscovery adventure. 3,000 miles away, Sean stood in his apartment at 6 a.m., holding a packed carry-on bag and staring at his reflection in the hallway mirror. He looked like a man on the edge of either the best or worst decision of his life. His phone showed 17 missed calls from Janet, who had arrived at the office to find his hastily scrawled note, "Personal emergency. Cancel all meetings for the rest of the week. Will explain later." It wasn't entirely a lie. Realizing you were in love with someone who might never return to your life felt like an emergency of the most personal kind. Sean had spent the night researching flights, hotels, and what felt like every article ever written about Santorini. He had never done anything this impulsive, this completely divorced from logic and business sense. His entire life had been built on careful planning, strategic thinking, and controlled risk. But Kate's laughter from that cooking video kept echoing in his memory, and the thought of never telling her how he felt had become unbearable. His Uber arrived at JFK just as Kate was posting a new photo to Instagram, her and Charles at a seaside taverna, both laughing over what appeared to be a plate of questionably prepared seafood. The caption read, "Sometimes the best surprises are the ones that remind you of who you used to be." Sean stared at the image during his entire wait at the gate. Charles was handsome in an academic way, clearly comfortable with Kate, obviously someone who had known her long before Sean had ever entered her life. The easy intimacy between them in the photo made Sean question everything about his impulsive decision. What right did he have to insert himself into Kate's journey of self-discovery? What if his arrival would only complicate the peace she had clearly found? But as his flight was called for boarding, Sean looked at the photo one more time and noticed something that steeled his resolve. Kate's smile, while genuine, didn't reach her eyes the way it had in her solo photos. There was something held back, something careful, even in her joy. He had seen that look before. In meetings when she was managing everyone else's emotions while hiding her own. During presentations when she was being the person everyone expected rather than who she truly was. Sean boarded the plane with a clarity that surprised him. He wasn't going to Santorini to disrupt Kate's peace. He was going because he finally understood that he might be the one person who had seen past all her professional perfection to the authentic woman underneath. As Kate prepared for an evening with her oldest friend, she had no way of knowing that the man who had been haunting her thoughts was currently 37,000 feet above the Atlantic, flying toward a confrontation that would force them both to choose between the safety of what they knew and the terrifying possibility of what they could become. The sound of footsteps can change everything. Kate was about to learn that lesson firsthand. The terrace restaurant overlooked the Aegean like a painter's dream, its whitewashed tables catching the golden light of the setting sun. Kate and Charles had claimed a corner table where the sea breeze carried the scent of grilled octopus and wild herbs. For the first time in months, Kate felt completely relaxed, her shoulders no longer carrying the invisible weight of deadlines and expectations. "I still can't believe you just left," Charles said, twirling his pasta thoughtfully. "The Kate I know plans everything down to the minute. You probably had backup plans for your backup plans." Kate laughed, the sound carrying freely across the terrace. "I shocked myself. One minute I was staring at a promotion offer, the next I was booking a flight to Greece." She paused, her fork suspended midway to her mouth. "Maybe that's the problem. I'd forgotten how to be spontaneous. Or maybe," Charles suggested with the gentle wisdom that had made him her favorite study partner, "you'd forgotten how to listen to yourself instead of everyone else's expectations." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the restaurant's entrance. Kate glanced over absently, then did a double take that made her drop her fork with a clatter. Sean Bean stood at the hostess station, looking travel-worn but unmistakably elegant, even in his wrinkled button-down shirt and jeans. His dark hair was disheveled from the long journey, his usually perfect appearance humanized by exhaustion and what looked suspiciously like uncertainty. Kate felt her breath catch somewhere between her chest and throat. "Oh my God. What?" Charles followed her gaze, then raised an eyebrow. "Friend of yours?" "My boss," Kate whispered, her mind struggling to process the impossibility of Sean being here, in Santorini, at her restaurant, during her escape from everything he represented. Sean's steel-blue eyes swept the terrace and found her with the precision of a man who had memorized every detail of her face. The relief that flooded his expression was quickly replaced by something more complex when he noticed Charles. For a moment, that felt suspended in time. They simply stared at each other across 30 feet of Mediterranean evening. Kate saw the exact moment Sean registered the intimacy of her dinner, the wine glasses, the way she was leaning toward Charles in obvious comfort and familiarity. "Kate." Sean's voice carried across the space as he approached their table with measured steps, each one seeming to cost him something. She stood reflexively, her body responding to 3 years of professional conditioning, even as her mind reeled. "Sean, what are you doing here? I needed to see you." The words came out more raw than he had obviously intended, and Kate saw him visibly collect himself. "I'm sorry to interrupt your dinner." Charles rose with the polished manners of someone raised in diplomatic circles. "You must be the famous boss, Charles Dance." He extended his hand with a smile that was friendly but measuring. Sean shook it, his gaze never leaving Kate's face. "Sean Bean, and your old friend," Charles answered easily. "College roommates, study partners, partners in crime. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd crash Kate's vacation." The word partners hung in the air with unfortunate ambiguity, and Kate watched Sean's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "Please, sit," Kate managed, gesturing to an empty chair while her thoughts spun wildly. I can't believe you're here. Is everything okay with the company? Did something happen?" Sean pulled out the chair but remained standing, his hands gripping the back with what looked like white knuckles. "Nothing's wrong with Morrison and Associates. I came because—" He stopped, glanced at Charles, then back at Kate. "Because I realized some conversations can't wait for conference rooms." The weight of his words settled over the table like evening mist. Charles, ever perceptive, cleared his throat diplomatically. "You know what? I think I'll take a walk, let you two catch up on work stuff." He stood, kissing Kate's cheek in a gesture that was clearly platonic, but that made Sean's expression darken. "I'll be at the hotel bar when you're ready for that nightcap we discussed." After Charles disappeared into the crowd of diners, an electric silence descended between Kate and Sean. She gestured again to the chair, and this time he sat, though his posture remained rigid with barely contained energy. "Sean, you're scaring me. What conversation couldn't wait?" Kate's voice was steadier than she felt. "Did I do something wrong? Is this about the promotion?" "No. God, no." Sean ran his hand through his hair, a gesture so unlike his usual controlled demeanor that Kate felt her concern deepen. "Kate, do you know what it's been like at the office without you?" "Probably more peaceful," she attempted with a weak smile. "Empty." The word came out like a confession. "It's been completely empty. Not just professionally, though you're right, the Hartwell presentation is a disaster without your input. But personally, I've been walking past your office like some kind of lost teenager, checking your Instagram posts like they hold the secrets of the universe." Kate felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You've been looking at my Instagram?" "Obsessively." Sean's laugh was self-deprecating and slightly wild. I've seen you cook that Greek disaster of a meal about 50 times. I know you're reading The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and that you rated that little bookstore 5 stars on Google. I know you bought 3 scarves you don't need, and that you've been writing in a journal again. The detailed knowledge of her activities should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like being truly seen for the first time in years. "Sean," she began, but he held up his hand. "Let me finish before I lose my courage." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Watching you discover yourself here, seeing you laugh without calculation or agenda, realizing that you've been carrying this light inside you that our corporate world has been slowly dimming, it made me understand that I've been lying to myself for months." Kate's heart began to race. Lying about what? Sean was quiet for a long moment. The sounds of the restaurant, clinking glasses, conversations in multiple languages, the distant cry of seagulls, filling the space between them. "About the fact that I'm in love with you." The words landed between them like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through everything Kate thought she understood about their relationship, about this trip, about the careful boundaries she had constructed around her professional life. "Sean," she whispered, but found she had no words to follow his name. "I know this is crazy," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "I know I'm your boss. I know this complicates everything. I know you're here with Charles, and I have no right to show up and turn your world upside down. But Kate, I couldn't let you disappear into this new version of yourself without telling you that the old version, the one I fell in love with during late-night strategy sessions and Monday morning presentations, that woman changed my life just by being herself." As Kate stared at the man who had just upended everything she thought she knew about their relationship, one question echoed through her mind. How do you respond to a declaration of love from someone you trained yourself not to love back, especially when your heart was already betraying you by racing toward the very answer you were afraid to give? Some truths arrive like whispers. Others crash into your life like waves against cliffs. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, charged with 3 years of unspoken tension and the weight of Sean's confession. Kate stared at him, this man she thought she knew, seeing him as if, for the first time, his usual corporate armor had been stripped away by travel and vulnerability, revealing someone raw and desperately human. "You love me," she repeated quietly, as if testing the words for truth. "Completely." Sean's voice was steady now, as though saying it once had broken some internal dam. "I've probably loved you since that first presentation, when you told the Brennan Industries board that their campaign was emotionally tone-deaf and culturally myopic. I watched you dismantle their entire strategy with such elegant precision that I forgot to breathe." Despite everything, Kate felt her lips quirk upward. "You were so angry at me after that meeting." "I was terrified of you," Sean corrected. "You were this brilliant force who could see through every corporate facade, including mine. Do you know how many times I rewrote emails to you because I was afraid you'd see past my professional distance to what I was really feeling?" Kate's mind raced through 3 years of interactions, reframing every extended meeting, every consultation he'd requested, every time he'd found reasons to include her in decisions that didn't strictly require her input. "The London promotion," she said slowly. 6 months working directly with you in Europe. That wasn't just about my qualifications, was it?" Sean had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Your qualifications are impeccable, but yes, I wanted more time with you. I told myself it was purely professional." "And the Meridian campaign? You fought the board to give me creative control, because you were the only person who could make it work, but also because—" He paused, his fingers drumming against the table. "Because watching you succeed makes me happier than my own achievements." Kate felt something shift inside her chest, a careful wall she'd built around her professional relationships beginning to crack. "Sean, this is impossible? Inappropriate? Career suicide?" He leaned forward. "I know. I've listed every reason why I should have kept these feelings buried. But Kate, seeing you here, seeing you discover who you are when you're not managing everyone else's expectations, I realized I've been wasting time trying to be the responsible boss when what I really want is to be the man who makes you laugh the way you did in that cooking video." A laugh escaped her, unbidden and slightly hysterical. "You want to make me laugh while I destroy Greek cuisine?" "I want to make you laugh, period. I want to be the person you call when something amazing happens. I want to know what you think about when you're writing in that journal. I want to understand why you light up when you talk about books, but get that careful expression when you discuss quarterly projections." Kate's breath caught. He had been watching her far more closely than she'd ever realized. Those projections are important. They are. But they're not you. The real you is the woman who posts pictures of terrible pasta disasters and calls them culinary adventures. The you who's been hiding behind professional perfection because you think that's what the world expects. Maybe it is what the world expects, Kate said quietly. Maybe professional perfection is the only way people like me get taken seriously. Sean's expression grew fierce. People like you. Kate, you could walk into any boardroom in America and command respect based purely on your intelligence and integrity. Your race, your gender, those aren't limitations you need to overcome. They're part of what makes your perspective invaluable. Easy for you to say, Kate replied, not unkindly but with the weight of lived experience. You've never had to be twice as good to get half the recognition. You're right, Sean acknowledged immediately. I can't understand that struggle, but I can see how it's shaped you into someone who never shows weakness, never admits uncertainty, never allows herself to be anything less than flawless. He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. What I'm trying to say is that I love all of it. Your strength, your ambition, your unwillingness to settle for less than you deserve. But I also love the version of you I'm seeing here, the one who admits she can't cook and laughs at her own mistakes. Kate looked down at his hand, so close to hers that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. 3 years of careful professional distance, and now this conversation that was unraveling everything she thought she understood about their relationship. Why now? She asked. Why here in Santorini when I'm finally figuring out who I am outside of work? Because, Sean said simply, I was afraid that the woman you're becoming might not have room for the man I've been. I was afraid you'd discover that you don't need Morrison and Associates, or New York, or... He swallowed hard. Or me. Kate felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming honesty of his admission. This powerful, successful man was sitting across from her, completely vulnerable, admitting that he was afraid of losing something he'd never actually had. Sean, she began, then stopped. How could she explain that she'd been fighting her own feelings for months, that every late-night strategy session had felt charged with possibility, that she'd taken this trip partly to escape the growing awareness that her feelings for him had moved far beyond professional respect? I know you need time to process this, Sean said, misreading her silence. I know Charles is my friend, Kate interrupted firmly. My oldest friend, but just a friend. There's nothing romantic between us. Relief flooded Sean's features so obviously that Kate almost smiled. Really? Really. But Sean, even if Charles weren't a factor, this changes everything. We work together. I report to you. The power dynamic alone... Then quit, Sean said immediately, then caught himself. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... Did you just tell me to quit my job so you could date me? Kate's voice held a note of disbelief. Sean closed his eyes briefly. No. God, no. Kate, I would never ask you to sacrifice your career for me. What I meant was, there are ways to restructure the company so we wouldn't have a direct reporting relationship. Or I could step back from day-to-day operations. Or you'd restructure your own company for me? I'd do anything for you, Sean said quietly. I'd give up Morrison and Associates entirely if that's what it took. Kate, you have to understand. Success means nothing if I can't share it with the person who inspires me to deserve it. As Kate stared into the eyes of the man who had just offered to upend his entire professional life for her, she felt the last of her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble, and realized that the terrifying, exhilarating truth was that she'd been falling in love with him too, one professional interaction at a time, for longer than she'd ever allowed herself to admit. Sometimes the most important conversations happen when you stop trying to find the right words. Kate stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the stone terrace. The weight of Sean's confession, the intensity of his gaze, the way her heart was hammering against her ribs, it all felt too much for the intimate confines of the restaurant table. I need to walk, she said, her voice slightly breathless. I need air. I need space to think. Sean rose immediately. Of course. I'll head back to my hotel. No, the word came out sharper than she intended. I mean, come with me, please. I can't sit still right now. They left the restaurant in silence, Sean dropping enough euros on the table to cover both their meals without a word. The cobblestone streets of Oya were quieter now, the tour groups having departed with the sunset, leaving behind couples strolling hand in hand and locals closing up their shops for the evening. Kate led them down a winding path she had discovered on her second day, one that curved away from the main tourist areas, toward a secluded overlook. The only sounds were their footsteps on stone and the distant whisper of waves against the cliffs below. "You know what's funny?" Kate said finally, her voice carrying in the still air. "I came here to figure out who I am when I'm not performing. Not being the perfect employee, the successful black woman who has it all together, the person everyone can count on to have the right answer." She paused, kicking a small pebble with her sandal. "And then you show up and tell me you love all those versions of me." Sean walked beside her, close enough that she could feel his presence but careful not to crowd her space. "I love the woman who contains all of those versions. The one who's strong enough to be perfect when she needs to be and brave enough to be human when she wants to be." They reached the overlook, a small stone platform that jutted out over the caldera, offering an unobstructed view of the star-filled sky reflected in the dark water below. Kate gripped the stone railing, letting the sea breeze cool her flushed cheeks. "Can I tell you something embarrassing?" she asked, not looking at him. "Please. That first year at Morrison and Associates, I used to rehearse conversations with you in my bathroom mirror. I'd practice presenting ideas, defending strategies, even small talk about the weather." She laughed softly. "I was terrified of saying something stupid in front of you." "You were terrified of me?" Sean's voice held genuine surprise. "Not terrified of you personally, terrified of disappointing you. You had this way of listening, really listening when I spoke, like my opinion actually mattered. I wasn't used to that from men in power." Kate turned to face him, leaning against the railing. "Most of them would wait for me to finish talking so they could explain why I was wrong. You would ask follow-up questions." Sean stepped closer, his expression soft in the moonlight. "Your opinions did matter. They still do. Kate, you changed how I think about everything. Marketing, leadership, what it means to really connect with people. But that's not why you fell in love with me, is it?" Kate's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "It wasn't just professional respect." Sean was quiet for a long moment, considering his words. "Do you remember the Christmas party 2 years ago? You wore that emerald green dress, and you were talking to Janet's daughter about books. You were so animated, recommending stories and asking about her favorite characters. You looked—" He paused, running his hand through his hair. "You looked like joy personified. That's when I knew it wasn't just respect anymore." Kate felt warmth spread through her chest. "I remember that conversation. Sophie was upset because some kids at school said reading was boring. You spent 20 minutes convincing a 10-year-old that stories could change her life. You missed the whole cocktail hour with clients because you were more interested in nurturing one little girl's love of reading." Sean's voice grew tender. "That's who you are underneath all the professional success, Kate. Someone who genuinely cares about making the world a little better, one person at a time." "You notice that," Kate whispered. "I notice everything about you," Sean admitted. "The way you tap your pen when you're thinking. How you always bring coffee for the security guards when you work late. The fact that you keep that photo of your niece on your desk, even though she's not supposed to have personal items in the executive workspace." Kate felt tears sting her eyes. "You really see me. I've been seeing you for 3 years. I just finally found the courage to say it out loud." They stood in comfortable silence, the vast Mediterranean stretching endlessly before them. Kate felt something shift inside her, like a door she'd kept locked was finally creaking open. "Sean," she said softly, "when I took this trip, I told myself I was trying to remember who I was before I became so focused on success. But maybe I was really trying to become someone who was brave enough to want more than just professional achievement." "What kind of more?" His voice was careful, hopeful. Kate turned to face him fully, her dark eyes reflecting the starlight. "The kind where I stopped being afraid of letting someone see all of me. The successful parts and the messy parts and the parts that laugh at terrible cooking disasters." Sean's breath caught. "Kate, I've been lying to myself too," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "All those late meetings, all those times I asked for your input on projects that didn't really need it, all those moments when I caught myself watching you during presentations. I told myself it was professional curiosity. But it wasn't, was it?" "What was it?" Sean asked, stepping closer until only inches separated them. Kate reached up, her fingers brushing against his cheek with the lightness of a whisper. "It was me falling in love with you and being too scared to admit it even to myself." Sean's eyes closed briefly at her touch, as if he were memorizing the feeling. "Kate, are you sure? Because once we cross this line—" "I'm terrified," she interrupted, her thumb tracing along his jawline. "But I'm also tired of living my life according to what's safe and appropriate and professionally wise. For once I want to do something, because it makes my heart race, and my soul feel alive. Sean covered her hand with his, pressing her palm fully against his cheek. You make me feel alive too. You make me want to be better than I am. You're already better than you think, Kate whispered, and then she was rising on her toes, closing the distance between them with a courage she'd never known she possessed. Their first kiss tasted like wine and starlight, and 3 years of carefully suppressed longing finally set free. And as Kate melted into Sean's arms above the endless Aegean, she realized that sometimes the most important decisions aren't made with your head, but with the part of your heart that knows what it wants before your mind catches up. Dawn has a way of making the impossible feel inevitable. Kate woke to the sound of waves, and something she hadn't experienced in years, complete peace. Sunlight filtered through the gauze curtains of her hotel room, casting everything in a golden glow that felt like a blessing. She stretched languidly, her body remembering the evening before in a cascade of sensations. Sean's hands in her hair, the way he had whispered her name against her lips, the careful tenderness with which they had explored 3 years of suppressed longing. He was still asleep beside her, his face relaxed in a way she had never seen during their professional interactions. Without the armor of expensive suits and corporate responsibility, Sean looked younger, almost vulnerable. His dark hair was tousled, and there was a small scar near his left eyebrow that she had never noticed before. Kate propped herself up on her elbow, studying his face in the morning light. Last night felt like a dream, but the very real warmth of his body next to hers proved otherwise. They had talked until nearly dawn, sharing stories and secrets that had nothing to do with quarterly reports or market strategies. "You're staring," Sean murmured without opening his eyes, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I'm memorizing," Kate replied softly. "This version of you that no one else gets to see." Sean opened his steel blue eyes, immediately alert and focused on her face. "Good morning, beautiful." Kate felt heat rise in her cheeks. Even after everything they had shared, casual intimacy still felt foreign to her. "Good morning. Did you sleep okay? The bed's probably smaller than what you're used to." Sean reached up, tucking a strand of her hair behind her ear. "Kate, I slept better than I have in months. Stop worrying about my comfort level." She laughed, recognizing her own tendency to manage everyone else's experience. "Old habits. I like taking care of people, but maybe—" Sean's thumb traced along her cheekbone. "Maybe you could let me take care of you for a change." Before Kate could respond, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She glanced at it and groaned. "Charles, I completely forgot about him. We were supposed to have breakfast this morning." Sean's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. You should go." Kate caught the subtle shift in his tone. "Sean, Charles is my friend. Nothing more, nothing less. Last night didn't change that friendship, but it did change everything else." "I know," Sean said, though his voice still carried an edge of uncertainty. "It's just he's known you longer. He knew you before you had to be strong all the time." Kate leaned down, kissing him softly. "But he doesn't know the me that fell in love with a man brave enough to fly across the world to tell me how he feels." Sean's arms tightened around her. "I love you, Kate. Whatever comes next, I need you to know that." "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "And whatever comes next, we'll figure it out together." An hour later, Kate found Charles at the hotel cafe, looking remarkably refreshed for someone who had supposedly spent the evening drinking alone at the bar. He stood when he saw her approaching, his expression knowing. "Well, well," he said, pulling out her chair with exaggerated gallantry. "You look like a woman who's had some interesting conversations." Kate felt her cheeks warm. "Charles." "Relax, Katie. I'm happy for you." Charles sat across from her, his expression growing more serious. "I was wondering when you'd finally stop pretending you didn't have feelings for him. Was I that obvious? To someone who's known you since you were 19? Absolutely. You got that same look you had when you were trying to convince yourself you didn't want to study abroad because it might set back your graduation timeline." Kate laughed despite herself. "And you told me I was being ridiculous then too." "Because you were. And you're being ridiculous now if you're already planning all the reasons why this can't work." Charles signaled the waiter for coffee. "Tell me about him. The real him, not the CEO version." Kate found herself describing Sean in ways she had never allowed herself to think about before. His dry sense of humor, the way he remembered small details about everyone on their team, how he had once spent his entire lunch break helping their intern fix her resume. "He sounds like a good man," Charles said when she finished. "He is. But Charles, it's complicated. The professional situation, the power dynamics, the fact that I have no idea what happens when we go back to New York. Kate. Charles reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Do you remember what you told me when I was terrified to propose to Sarah? Kate smiled at the memory. I told you that love isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to figure them out together. Exactly. And you also told me that the biggest risk isn't taking a chance on love, it's missing the chance entirely. They were interrupted by the arrival of Sean himself, looking polished despite the early hour, and the obvious fact that he was wearing yesterday's clothes. Kate felt her heart skip at the sight of him, and from Charles's amused expression, her reaction was clearly visible. I hope I'm not interrupting, Sean said, though his tone suggested he hoped he was just a little. Not at all, Charles replied smoothly. I was just telling Kate how much I approve of men who are brave enough to chase the women they love across oceans. Sean's surprise was evident. You approve? Completely. Anyone who makes Kate light up the way you obviously do has my blessing. Charles stood, extending his hand again. Besides, I was planning to head back to Athens today anyway. My real vacation starts tomorrow, a wine tour through Tuscany that definitely doesn't need witnesses. After Charles left with promises to stay in touch and not-so-subtle hints about wedding invitations, Kate and Sean found themselves alone at the cafe table, the morning stretching ahead of them with infinite possibility. So, Sean said, his fingers intertwining with hers across the table, what would you like to do with our first real day together? Kate considered the question, thinking about all the tourist attractions she had planned to visit, the museums and historical sites that had seemed so important when she was traveling alone. Now, with Sean's thumb tracing patterns across her knuckles, none of that seemed to matter. I want to show you my Santorini, she said finally. The little bookstore where I spent 3 hours yesterday. The place where they make the best coffee I've ever tasted. The spot where I watched the sunrise and realized I had been living someone else's version of success. Sean brought her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her palm. I want to see it all through your eyes. As they walked hand in hand through the winding streets of Oya, Kate realized that for the first time in her adult life, she wasn't planning the next step or calculating potential outcomes. She was simply living in a moment that felt too perfect to be real, yet too real to be anything other than the beginning of something extraordinary. Paradise has a way of making you forget that the real world is still waiting. 5 days passed like a dream, painted in Mediterranean blue and gold. Kate and Sean had fallen into a rhythm that felt both natural and miraculous. Morning coffee on her terrace, long walks through villages where time seemed to move slower, evenings watching sunsets that turned the sky into a canvas of impossible colors. They talked about everything except the inevitable return to New York, as if speaking about their regular lives might break the spell they were living under. But on their 6th morning together, reality arrived in the form of Kate's phone ringing insistently at dawn. It's my mother, Kate whispered, carefully extracting herself from Sean's arms. He murmured something incoherent and pulled a pillow over his head, making Kate smile despite the early interruption. Hi, Mama, Kate answered, stepping onto the terrace where the morning air was cool and salt-tinged. Catherine Dickey, don't you— Hi, Mummy, came her mother's familiar voice, warm but tinged with concern. I've been calling you for 2 days. Your phone keeps going straight to voicemail. Kate glanced back through the glass doors at Sean, still beautifully disheveled in her bed, and felt a flutter of guilt. She had been so lost in their bubble of new love that she had barely checked her phone. I'm sorry, Mama. I've been exploring the island. The service can be spotty. Her mother's tone suggested she wasn't entirely buying the explanation. Well, I'm calling because your sister's having complications with the pregnancy. Nothing serious, she added quickly, but she's on bed rest for the next month and she's going stir-crazy. She could really use her big sister right about now. Kate felt the familiar weight of family responsibility settle on her shoulders. Is she okay? Do I need to come home early? No, baby. Don't cut your vacation short, but maybe give her a call when you get a chance. You know how she worries. After promising to call Maya later, Kate hung up and remained on the terrace, watching fishing boats dot the horizon. The outside world was reasserting itself, reminding her that she had a life, responsibilities, people who needed her beyond this sun-soaked paradise. Everything okay? Sean's voice was rough with sleep as he joined her on the terrace, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Kate leaned into his warmth. My sister's having pregnancy complications. Nothing serious, but she's scared. Do you need to go home? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither wanted to address directly. Going home meant returning to Morrison and Associates, to professional boundaries, to the complicated reality of navigating a relationship that had begun in the consequence-free environment of vacation. "Not yet," Kate said. "But Sean, we need to talk about what happens when we do go home." Sean's arms tightened around her. "I know, I've been avoiding it too." They settled onto the cushioned daybed on the terrace, Kate curled against Sean's side as the sun climbed higher over the Aegean. For a while they just watched the world wake up around them. Hotel staff setting up breakfast service, early rising tourists heading out with cameras and guidebooks. "I've been thinking," Sean said finally. "About us, about work, about how we make this real when we're not living in a Greek fairy tale." Kate turned to face him. And I want to do this right, Kate. I want to court you properly, take you on real dates, meet your family, let you meet mine. I want us to figure out how to be together without either of us sacrificing what we've worked for." "That sounds perfect in theory," Kate said softly. "But Sean, you're still my boss. Even if we restructure the company, people will always wonder if I earned my success or if I'm sleeping my way to the top." Sean's jaw tightened. "Anyone who knows your work would never think that. You have privilege I don't have," Kate said gently but firmly. "You can take risks that I can't. A relationship scandal might be a minor inconvenience for you. For me, it could define my entire career." They sat in silence, the weight of practical considerations settling between them like a wall. Kate felt Sean's frustration in the tension of his body, but she also felt his understanding. "What if," Sean said slowly, "what if you didn't come back to Morrison and Associates at all?" Kate pulled back to look at him fully. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if this trip has shown you that there are other ways to use your talents? You could start your own consultancy, work with clients who appreciate your vision. I could be your first client. Arm's length, completely professional contracts." Kate felt a spark of something that might have been excitement. "You'd really do that? Help me start my own company? I'd invest in you in a heartbeat. Kate, you're brilliant enough to build something bigger than what any existing company could offer you." Sean's eyes were bright with possibility. "And this way we'd be equals, partners in business, partners in life." "It's a huge risk," Kate said, though her mind was already racing with possibilities. "The biggest risk would be giving up on us because we're afraid of what other people might think." Kate's phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Katie, I'm freaking out about this bed rest thing. Can you call me? I need my big sister's wisdom." Kate showed Sean the message and his expression softened immediately. "Call her. I'll make us breakfast." As Sean headed inside, Kate dialed her sister's number, settling back onto the terrace cushions. "Katie!" Maya's voice was tearful with relief. "Thank God. I've been going crazy here. The doctor says I need to stay horizontal for the next month, and you know me. I can't sit still for 5 minutes, let alone 4 weeks." "Hey, breathe," Kate said automatically, slipping into her role as the calm, reassuring older sister. "Tell me what happened." As Maya explained the complications, nothing dangerous but requiring careful monitoring, Kate found herself offering practical solutions, emotional support, and the kind of steady presence her family had always counted on her to provide. "You sound different," Maya said when she had calmed down. "Happier, more relaxed." Kate glanced through the glass doors at Sean moving around her small kitchen, making coffee with the careful attention he brought to everything he cared about. "I am relaxed," Kate admitted. "I'm remembering who I am when I'm not constantly performing." "Good for you, big sister. You deserve some peace." Maya paused. "Is there something, or someone, making you particularly peaceful?" Kate laughed, unsurprised that her sister had picked up on the change. "Maybe. It's complicated, but maybe." "Complicated how? Is he married? Criminal? A Yankees fan?" "Worse," Kate said with a grin. "He's my boss." The silence on the other end of the line was telling. "Katie, I know all the reasons it's crazy, but Maya, what if sometimes the crazy thing is also the right thing?" As Kate finished her call and watched Sean approach with 2 cups of perfectly prepared Greek coffee, she realized that the conversation about their future couldn't be postponed much longer, because in 3 days their Santorini paradise would end, and they would have to decide whether their love was strong enough to survive the transition from dream to reality. Every love story has a moment when fear and hope stand at opposite ends of the same decision. Their last night in Santorini arrived with the weight of inevitability. Kate stood on her terrace, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, while Sean packed their bags inside, A domestic intimacy that should have felt natural, but instead filled her with a bittersweet ache. Tomorrow they would fly back to New York. Tomorrow they would return to Morrison and Associates, to professional protocols, to a world that would scrutinize every interaction between them with the sharp eyes of office politics and social media speculation. "You're thinking too loud," Sean said, joining her at the railing with 2 glasses of wine. Kate accepted the glass but didn't drink. "I'm terrified, Sean. Of us? Of losing myself again. Of going back to being the Kate who calculates every word, every gesture, every decision based on how it will affect my career." She turned to face him, her dark eyes reflecting the dying light. "What if loving you means becoming someone I don't recognize?" Sean was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. "What if not loving me means the same thing?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Kate realized that somewhere in the past week, she had stopped being able to imagine her life without Sean in it. Not as her boss, not as a professional mentor, but as the man who made her laugh at her own cooking disasters, and who looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in any room. "I got a call today," Sean said carefully, "from the London office. They want to fast-track the European expansion, and they want someone to head it up permanently. Full autonomy, significant equity stake, basically building Morrison and Associates Europe from the ground up." Kate felt her stomach drop. "That sounds like an incredible opportunity." "It is. And Kate, I want you to take it." She stared at him, wine glass frozen halfway to her lips. "What?" "Think about it," Sean continued, his voice gaining enthusiasm. "You'd be completely independent, building something entirely your own. No one could question your qualifications or suggest you got the position through anything other than merit. And London?" He stepped closer, his hands framing her face gently. "London is only a 7-hour flight from New York. I could visit every month. You could come back whenever you wanted." "Sean, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I love you enough to let you go, if that's what it takes for you to believe in us, without compromising who you are." Kate felt tears prick at her eyes. "You'd really do that? Support me taking a job on another continent?" "I'd support you taking a job on another planet, if it meant you could love me without fear." The words hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Kate set down her wine glass and took Sean's face in her hands, studying the man who had just offered to sacrifice proximity for her peace of mind. "You beautiful, impossible man," she whispered. "Don't you understand that the problem isn't geography?" Sean's brow furrowed. "Then what?" "The problem is that I've spent so many years being afraid to want things just because I want them. I've made every decision based on strategy, on what was safe, on what other people would think." Kate's voice grew stronger. "But you know what I want, Sean. I want to come home to New York with you. I want to figure out how to make this work without running away to another continent. I want to be brave enough to love you publicly. Professionally be damned." Sean's eyes widened. "Kate, are you sure? Because once we walk into that office together, we'll face whatever comes as a team." Kate rose on her toes, pressing her forehead against his. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "I want to start that consultancy we talked about. Morrison and Associates can be my first client, but I want to build something that's mine. I want contracts that are transparent and public, so no one can question the legitimacy of our professional relationship." Sean nodded immediately. "Done. What else?" "I want to meet your family. I want you to meet mine. I want us to stop acting like this is something to hide or be ashamed of." "God, yes. My brother's been dying to meet you since I mentioned you existed." Kate laughed, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "And I want you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that if this doesn't work, if the professional complications become too much, if the scrutiny becomes unbearable, if we realize we were wrong about this, promise me we'll end it cleanly. No drawn-out professional awkwardness, no making our entire staff uncomfortable with our personal drama." Sean's expression grew serious. "Kate, I'm not planning for this to fail. Neither am I. But I need to know we're both mature enough to handle it if it does." Sean was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I promise, but I also promise to fight for us every single day, so that conversation never becomes necessary." Kate felt the last of her walls crumble. "Then yes, Sean Bean. Yes to coming home together. Yes to building something together. Yes to whatever comes next." Sean lifted her off her feet, spinning her around as the last rays of sunlight painted the caldera in impossible shades of pink and gold. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I love you, Kate Dickey. I love your ambition, your intelligence, your terrible cooking, your incredible heart. I love how you make me want to be better than I am." "I love you too," Kate whispered against his lips. "I love your kindness, your integrity, the way you see the best in everyone. I love that you flew across the world just to tell me how you felt." As they kissed against the backdrop of the Santorini sunset, Kate felt something shift inside her chest. Not the familiar flutter of attraction or even the deeper warmth of affection, but something fundamental and unshakable. For the first time in her adult life, she was choosing love not as a compromise or a calculated risk, but as an act of faith in herself and in the man who had seen her truly and loved her completely. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain and challenging and full of obstacles they would have to navigate together. But as Sean's arms tightened around her and the Mediterranean evening wrapped them in its ancient peace, Kate realized that she was finally ready to stop planning her life and start living it. Tomorrow they would return to reality, but tonight belonged to them, to the choice they had made, to the love they had found, and to the beginning of a story that would be entirely their own. 6 months later, love doesn't always look like the fairy tales. Sometimes it looks like two people choosing each other every day, even when the world is watching. The conference room on the 38th floor of the Meridian building overlooked Central Park, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the autumn foliage like a living masterpiece. Kate Dickie stood at the head of the polished table, her navy blazer immaculate, her natural hair styled in an elegant updo that had become her signature look. Around the table sat executives from 3 major brands, all hanging on her every word as she presented the integrated campaign strategy that would launch their joint venture into the European market. "The key," Kate was saying, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had found her authentic power, "is understanding that authenticity can't be manufactured. It has to be lived, breathed, and demonstrated through every interaction with your audience." Sean watched from the back of the room, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. 6 months had passed since Santorini, and he still felt that familiar flutter in his chest when he watched Kate command a room. The difference now was that he no longer had to hide it. Kate Dickie Consulting had exceeded everyone's expectations, including Kate's own. What had started as a solution to their professional complications had evolved into something extraordinary, a boutique firm that specialized in authentic brand storytelling, with Kate as the visionary everyone wanted to hire. Morrison & Associates had been her first client, but they were no longer her only one. "Ms. Dickie," said Margaret Henley from Meridian Industries, "your proposal is exactly what we've been looking for. When can we start?" Kate smiled, the expression genuine and unguarded. "I can have contracts drawn up by Friday, and we can begin implementation next week." As the meeting concluded and clients filed out with enthusiastic handshakes and business cards, Kate began gathering her materials with the efficient grace that Sean had always admired. When the room finally emptied, leaving them alone, she looked up to find him watching her with unconcealed pride. "Stop looking at me like that," Kate said, though her own smile was soft with affection. "Like what?" "Like I just cured cancer instead of closing a consulting deal." Sean pushed off from the wall, approaching her with the easy confidence of a man completely secure in his relationship. "Can't I be proud of the woman I love building an empire?" "Empire seems a little dramatic for 6 employees and a rented office space." "Give it time," Sean said, reaching for her hand and bringing it to his lips. "Besides, I happen to like watching you conquer the world." Kate laughed, the sound carrying none of the careful modulation of her old professional persona. "Speaking of conquering, how did your board meeting go?" Sean's expression grew more serious. "They approved the London expansion. Full budget, 18-month timeline." He paused, studying her face. "They want me to oversee the launch personally." Kate felt her breath catch, though she tried to keep her expression neutral. "How long would you be gone? 3 months? Maybe 4? "Kate, I know we talked about this possibility, but nothing," Kate interrupted, stepping closer to him. "Sean, this is huge for Morrison & Associates. Of course you should go. I don't want to leave you." "You're not leaving me," Kate said firmly. "You're building something incredible, and I'll be right here building something incredible too. Besides," she added with a mischievous smile, "London is only 7 hours away. I might even have some European clients to visit while you're there." Sean's relief was palpable. "Have I mentioned lately that I love you?" "Only every day, but I don't mind hearing it again." "I love you, Kate Dickie. I love your ambition, your integrity, the way you've never let anyone, including me, dim your light. They were interrupted by a soft knock on the conference room door. Janet appeared, looking slightly flustered. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but Sean, your brother's here. He says it's urgent family business." Sean frowned. "Cameron's here? Did something happen?" "I don't think it's an emergency," Janet assured him. "He seems excited." Sean and Kate exchanged glances, then made their way to Sean's office, where they found Cameron Bean pacing excitedly near the windows. At 35, Cameron shared Sean's height and coloring, but carried himself with the slightly more relaxed demeanor of someone who ran the Boston office and spent more time sailing than in board meetings. "Finally," Cameron said when he saw them. "Do you know how hard it is to surprise you when you're always working?" "What's going on?" Sean asked, though he was smiling at his brother's obvious enthusiasm. Cameron pulled out his phone, swiping to a news article, which he handed to Sean with a grin. "Read it and weep, big brother." Sean scanned the article, his eyebrows rising steadily. "Kate, you need to see this." Kate moved to read over his shoulder and felt her own surprise mirror Sean's. The headline read, 30 under 30, Young Entrepreneurs Revolutionizing Business. Below it was a photograph of Kate at her desk, looking polished and professional, with a caption that made her heart race. Kate Dickey, 27, founder of Kate Dickey Consulting, has built a reputation for authentic brand storytelling that connects with diverse audiences in ways traditional agencies struggle to achieve. "Keep reading," Cameron urged. Kate continued down the article, which detailed her rapid rise from corporate communications manager to successful entrepreneur, her innovative approaches to inclusive marketing, and her vision for the future of authentic brand engagement. The piece was respectful, professional, and focused entirely on her business acumen and creative vision. "Kate," Sean said softly, "this is incredible. National recognition, industry validation. They want to interview me for the cover story," Kate said, still staring at the article in disbelief. "The journalist called yesterday, but I thought it was just a small trade publication piece." Cameron laughed. "Trust my brother's girlfriend to be modest about making the biggest business magazine in the country." "Speaking of which," Sean said, turning to his brother with a suspicious look, "how did you know about this before we did?" Cameron's grin turned slightly sheepish. "I may have had a Google alert set up for Kate's name ever since you two went public with your relationship. I wanted to make sure I caught any important news about my future sister-in-law." Kate felt warmth spread through her chest at the casual way Cameron referred to her as family. In the 6 months since Santorini, Sean's family had embraced her with an enthusiasm that still sometimes caught her off guard. Her own family had been equally welcoming to Sean, with her mother declaring him a good man who clearly adores my daughter, and her sister Maya insisting he was exactly the kind of stable influence Kate needs in her life. "This calls for champagne," Cameron declared. "I'm taking you both to dinner to celebrate. No arguments." As Cameron left to make reservations, Kate sank into one of Sean's office chairs, the magazine article still in her hands. "You okay?" Sean asked, settling into the chair across from her. "I keep waiting for the catch," Kate admitted. 6 months ago, I was terrified that loving you would cost me my professional credibility. Now I'm being recognized for building something entirely my own, while being in the healthiest relationship of my life. It feels too good to be true." Sean leaned forward, taking her hands in his. "Maybe it feels too good to be true because you've spent so many years expecting life to be a struggle. Maybe this is just what happens when you stop fighting yourself and start trusting what you want." Kate looked around Sean's office, remembering the first time she had sat here 3 years ago, desperate to prove herself worthy of his professional respect. Now she was here as an equal, as a partner in every sense of the word, as a woman who had found a way to honor both her ambition and her heart. "Sean," she said quietly, "do you ever miss the simplicity of when we were just boss and employee?" Sean was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "You know what I miss? I miss the excuse to spend all day thinking about you and calling it work. But Kate, I wouldn't trade what we have now for anything. Watching you become who you were always meant to be, getting to love you openly, building a life together where we both get to be exactly who we are. This is better than simple." Kate stood, moving around the desk to where Sean sat, and settled onto his lap with the easy intimacy of two people who had learned to navigate both boardrooms and bedrooms together. "I love you, Sean Bean," she said, framing his face with her hands. "I love the man who was brave enough to chase me to Greece, and I love the man who's brave enough to let me build my own empire while building his own." "And I love you, Kate Dickey," Sean replied, his arms encircling her waist. The woman who taught me that the best partnerships aren't about one person completing the other, but about two complete people choosing to build something extraordinary together. As the New York skyline glittered outside the windows and the magazine article lay forgotten on the desk, Kate realized that this was what happiness looked like. Not a destination reached, but a choice made daily. She had chosen love, chosen courage, chosen to trust that she could have both professional success and personal fulfillment. And every morning, she chose it again. Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. What did this story teach you about the courage it takes to choose love without sacrificing your dreams? Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.